much right now, and I'll let Gregor take it.
Thanks, Will. So I'm glad this is a setting in which we can have a conversation. You know, what I want to try to do is talk about what it might be like to teach an on-campus course in the next 5 to 10 years as we kind of go through this period of rapid innovation in post-secondary education, and in particular MOOCs. So, you know, I'm going to start by talking about MOOCs. Now, I don't want to make a big deal about terms. So when I say MOOCs, I mean the whole thing. MOOCs, SPOCs, MOORs, Canadian MOOCs, US MOOCs, everybody's MOOCs. I just mean basically the whole space. In some sense, what I mean is internet-based, inexpensive, well-resourced multimedia courses. Because I actually think those are the characteristics that matter the most. So I want to look at some of what's happening, look at some of the state-of-the-art, talk a little bit about other innovations in context, and then sort of say, well, in the face of all that, you know, what might we do? So this talk will proceed from the more definite to the less definite. I really don't know what we might do. I mean, I have some ideas about what we might do. I don't have a strong vision about what's going to work. So hopefully we can talk about that. So let me just start with some numbers. Oh, I updated these today. The main purpose of this slide is to say there's a lot of them. These are, of course, the 3 big players. Coursera has 479 courses. They're trying to get to 500. edX has 85 courses. Udacity has 30 courses. They, of course, have very different target markets. But this slide is just about the 3 big players have a lot of courses. So there's a lot going on. While we're on numbers, here's one more number slide. So there's a great deal of talk, of course, about the dropout rate. And, you know, I think we've learned a lot about this. There's a recent paper from the Lytics lab at John Mitchell and Roy Pease Lytics lab at Stanford. It's based on data from 3 computer science courses. This matches what all 4 of us who did UBC MOOCs experienced, and everybody I've talked to experienced. Basically, what the size of the circle is how many people are in it. The letter is the characteristic of that kind of student. So A means auditing. These are people who watch videos and don't do anything else. And the thickness of the line is how many people traverse the line. So in the first week, 50% of the course goes from auditing to out. Right? That's just because, you know, they never were really in the course. The only way the website lets you find out more about the course is to click on the Enroll Me button. Right? The website's driving up enrollment. You know, between the 6 months between when they signed up and now, they just got some other ideas. The interesting thing, I think, is that once you get out to about week 3 or 4, things stabilize pretty well. And you've got a large contingent of auditors, and you've got a decent-sized contingent of auditors, and a decent-sized contingent of students who are on track. But a lot of people, you know, never really participate. I just thought I'd put this up because this notion of the dropout rate gets so much press. And I really just don't think that's really a meaningful notion. As Kevin Leighton Brown, who also did one of the UBC MOOCs, says, you know, if you get 100,000 students and only 10% of them take the final exam, that's a lot of final exams. And if only 30% of them watch half the videos, there was still a lot of learning, right? 30,000 people watched half your videos. That's not nothing. So the dropout rate just doesn't mean what it means in schools. So now let's look at some of the state of the art. Let me just do a little quick poll here so I know. Hopefully there'll be something here that you haven't seen before. How many people have watched sort of 3 or 4 hours of 2 MOOCs? How many people have watched 3 or 4 hours of 5 MOOCs? Oh, good. Some of this might be new to you. Let's just look at some examples about what these MOOCs are. And one of the things you're going to see in here is that this is one of the things that I've been learning a lot about, I think, is that video is a totally different medium than lecture. Producing a MOOC is not, in most cases, recording a lecture. Having said that, I will say that there are some rare exceptions. So MIT is in its 4th generation of open learning. So they have some rather extraordinary lectures in the can. And when you have these rather extraordinary lectures in the can, you can put them on video and build a MOOC around it. But I just want to point out that these were never, you know, this was never stick a webcam in the back of your classroom and go. Okay? These are 2 and 3 camera shoots. They're extremely well produced and rehearsed, and there's props, and there's ... So my main point here is to say, you know, most of them don't look like this, and the ones that look like this look incredibly good. MOOCs are not something you do with a webcam. And even once you've done that, you got to bring the guy out of retirement to do the promo video. That's one thing you got to do. But the other thing you got to do is you got to do all the other collaterals. So again, I just said that video is a different medium. I want to look at some examples about that. One of the key things is that students can pause and replay video. So video ends up being much denser than lecture. You go fast, you go dense, and when students want to stop, they stop. You can't do that in lecture. Because it's video, you can edit it in very interesting ways. You have much more control over time, and I'll show you a nice example of that. And of course, it can be more theatrical, in part because of the media, but in part because you bring professionals in to do that. So let's look at some examples. This is a course from Penn in calculus. This is a fun little course because it's kind of like a pun on the old style math lecture, right? It has sort of the aesthetic qualities of hand-drawn notation, except that, of course, it looks impossibly better than hand-drawn notation. Okay? Nobody can write this well, this much, except for maybe Walter Lewin. So there are some people who try to capture the sense of what lectures used to be, but even when they do that, they're not what lectures used to be. And again, the information density here is very high, and I'll come back to that again. Here's one from my own MOOC. Thought I'd have at least one slide where I knew what I was talking about. So mine is a course on programming. So we spend most of our time in the code editor editing because we're trying to show people how to do it. But one of the things we talk about is you kind of always want to keep track of the relation between what you're doing and the problem. So this is a program in which a cow marches back and forth across the screen. It's very exciting. And what we're doing is that as we do each test case, we draw a picture off to the right of what that test case is about. Now again, you end up here with something which when you were in PowerPoint school, you were taught to never put something like that on the screen. It's much too dense. But it's not much too dense at all. In fact, we got very good feedback about this from the students. What they do when they get to the end of something like this is they print it out. Because it's the summary of 5 or 6 minutes of video. Right? So because you build it up, because they can pause it at any time, you end up with a very different style of screen look than you would in a normal lecture. Here's another one also from UBC. So this is a visualization of summer temperature anomalies from 51 to 1980. And the visualization comes from NASA, and people here edited it all together to make it nice. And when it shows the first time, the way it's edited, they do an interesting thing, which is they talk over it just like I am now in order to distract you from paying attention to the details. Because then you get to the end and you go, wow, temperature changed a lot, right? And then you can go replay it and look at it in the details, right? There's this deliberate sort of editing of it to take advantage of the fact that it's video. I can give you 2 experiences of it because you can replay it. You could pull something like this off in lecture, of course. You can say, well, I'm going to show you something once, quickly, and then again. It's just harder. And again, going back to my class, you can't pull that off in lecture. You can't remember to make every notation clearly enough as you go. You can only do things like this in video. So those examples are all from STEM fields. There's a lot of talk about MOOCs being perfect for STEM, right? I wanted to look at 2 examples from arts now to see what we can learn there. So this is a course by Professor Alcock from Brown called Archaeology's Dirty Little Secrets. And this is the units, this is the sort of plan for Unit 1. And in Unit 1, as you can see, the question is what are these secrets anyway? And first, there's some little intro lectures about that, and then there's a conversation by someone with another archaeologist who works at Abydos. So let's just take a look at that. Oh, hang on a second. I'm not getting any sound. Let's try it again. Now I'm getting sound.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Laurel Bestock, my colleague at the Joukowsky Institute for Archaeology.
We'll just look at about a minute and a half of this.
And I'm going to kick off by asking her, tell us a secret about your site.
About my site. Well, when I think about secrets at Abydos in Egypt, I think on 2 levels. There are very literally unburied things that nobody has seen for thousands of years, and coming upon these spaces often, not just artifacts, but architecture. You find underground rooms that are free and clear, and once you find the door, you can walk in. That feeling of discovery is...
So that's incredible. I mean, look, if you're talking about underground buried rooms, it's pretty easy to engage the kids. These people should actually have to work for a living and teach programming. But let me make a more serious point. Here's week 2. In week 2, the unit question is there anything left to find? And we're back to Abydos.
Egypt is, I can't decide if it's every archaeologist's, worst nightmare or, just favorite thing in the world, because, the question, is there anything left to find in Egypt, seems pretty stupid.
Well, but in fact, it is a question that's asked often. We have these monuments. We've got pyramids. We've got temples. But we know them, right? What is left to find? Because the history of archaeology in Egypt is so old and so intensive, there is this expectation, well, we've done it all. What could possibly be left? But in fact, that's not accurate for a couple of reasons. There's certainly tons left to find.
I'll stop that there. So look, 2 points here. What she's done here is that the course has 2 structures. It has a unit structure organized around questions. And then there's these 4 cross-cutting conversations. So because it's on video, she's able to do a thing that's almost impossible to do in a normal lecture, which is every week she brings in another speaker who talks about that week's questions from their perspective. So the students are getting something incredible. They're getting the course and then other people's perspective on the course. Right? And they will answer her questions because, of course, it was recorded and she took the part of the interview that she wanted that actually addressed the questions. We can't do this, right? I mean, maybe Krugman is big enough of a name to get people to come to his class 8 times and talk about exactly what he wants. But the rest of us can't do this. You can't put together something like this in a class. You can only put together something like this on a video. It also helps if you're kind of a character the way she is. But this, I think, is pretty incredible for the students who take it. Here's another one, also from Brown. Let me just look at this for about a minute and a half, I think.
I want to start in introducing this course with the essential question that has got to be on your minds, just like it's on the minds of my students, which is, what will you get out of this course? After some 4.5 decades of teaching, I find it harder and harder to give a good answer to that question, what you will get out of it. So let me start with the negative, what you're not going to get out of it. What this course is not. It won't get you a job. I don't think that's a big surprise for anybody, but it won't get you a job. And I think in the framework of Coursera and the kinds of courses that we find so often in its platforms, this is a very significant kind of claim I'm making, that it won't get you a job, because many of the offerings, understandably, rightly, wonderfully, in the Coursera program, will in fact give you a kind of material, intellectual, perhaps professional benefit that you may learn key issues.
I'll stop it there. The reason I want to show you that class is 2 reasons. Let me come back to what he was saying and first show you this. Let me talk about what he was saying just there. So he's going right at the central question, right? What's it good for? And from the arts perspective, what's it good for? And if you watch the whole thing, he ends up coming out in a funny place, which is maybe MOOCs are better for arts than they are for the STEM fields. Because if we're not going to get you a job, maybe this is the media that we can reach more people about the value of learning those disciplines. So that's one thing that's going on in there that I think is quite interesting. I mean, he just decided to take this thing and go right at, you still need to know all this other stuff. And if MOOCs are going to increase the pressure on arts, this is his answer to that. And I think we need to keep answering that question in these and other ways. Look, I'm not trying to make him right. He seems to me to be a smart guy. I don't know enough about the subject matter to really say. But here's at least somebody saying these things don't have to get you a job to be worth doing. The second reason I want to put this up, and I think this is more important for the rest of us, is he says in his commencement announcement, what I hope this course has seeded is a richer sense of how books might build communities, how people who've never seen each other might weave together via shared texts and individual responses a fiction of relationship. Now, what's one of the biggest questions people have about MOOCs? Is there going to be any community? Is it just going to be me watching TV, or is there going to be a class there? Is there going to be the energy from a class? And he's basically saying, you know, I've spent my whole career studying how it is that a group of people who never see each other can read something, namely a book, and come to have a sense of community. And what I think is interesting about this class is, as compared to the people from the STEM fields, this is somebody whose subject matter is, whose field of study is, how do dislocated groups of people form an intellectual community? And he's bringing that right into the MOOC. So I think these courses from arts actually have a lot to tell us about how to make MOOCs. Really, the notion of decentralized community is in their field of study much more than it's, for example, in the field of study of a computer scientist. I mean, we can get the bits there, but you know, getting the bits there isn't the magic. What do I have next? Oh, here's another course from UBC, again on this theme of community. This is Sarah Birch and Sarah Harris's climate literacy course. The course is kind of half science and half sort of policy, half the science of climate change, half what are we going to do about it. And they had this very interesting two-part assignment in which they asked students to collect information about climate change near them and then write a proposal for mitigating that and pin it to a map. Now what's going on here is they took advantage of the fact that, you know, this course is decentralized, it's spread, it's massive, and it's distributed to do something, again, which you could not pull off in an on-campus course. Because it's the number of pins on this map and the geographic distribution of the pins that has power. All the other students in the course now benefit from this funny kind of first-hand but nonetheless distributed sense of climate change all over. Right? Somebody in my class who happens to live 8,000 miles away told me that down the street from them this thing is happening. That's a very powerful thing that, again, you know, you can't pull off with 20 people in a room. Again, on the subject of community, I guess all I'm saying in this slide is even if you don't do something really quite subtle and brilliant, the way Birch and Harris did in their class, these courses do have a sense of community. These are just numbers from the 4 UBC MOOCs in terms of forum postings. You know, and I guess I would just use these numbers. And so they basically talk about, you know, 10,000 total posts in a course, 16,000 total posts in a course. When you're running a MOOC all day long, you can wake up in the middle of the night and, you know, there's 20, 30, 40 more posts. There's this thing going on. Now, of course, in the midst of that, there's also some, let's be honest, nonsense. But there's a lot going on. So these things have a ton of energy, which I think is the thing which, you know, Weinstein's talking about harnessing, which Sarah Harris and Sarah Birch harnessed. I'm just trying to show you the raw numbers underneath it. So people who sort of say, you know, MOOCs are kind of this dead system, I just don't think that's quite right. Also, in terms of community, people are experimenting with how to bring students into it. There's one guy, this is completely unsustainable, but in the first offering of his MOOC, every week he went to a different Starbucks in the United States and held office hours. Now, I think he told them which Starbucks it was going to be. That's clearly not sustainable, but what is sustainable is to use Google Hangouts. Basically, it's standard practice in a MOOC now to use Google Hangouts to basically 8 students get to talk and everybody else gets to listen. And you do that once a week. We tried that in my class. It was an epic failure because Google Hangouts has this brilliant feature, which is that as soon as it detects keyboard activity, it shuts down the audio. So the students would say to me, show us how to do this. And I would say, great question. Let me start to show. So I could either type or talk. And basically, we used Google Hangouts twice. And it didn't work for us. But it works for anybody who's not typing. Okay. All of that said, MOOCs are much more than videos. There's, of course, the subtitles, there's the lecture notes, there's the in-video quizzes, the post-video quizzes, homework, ... What I want to talk about now for a minute is that all of these things produce lots of data. Lots and lots of data. So, for example, again, coming back to that thing I said at the beginning about what I think are the real constitutive properties of these things. If you have scale plus the internet channel plus data plus resources, okay, a poorly financed MOOC is not a MOOC. One thing you can do is that for each quiz question, for each wrong answer, you can make a separate video talking about why that's not the right answer. So you kind of get the TA that never says anything wrong, because it's on video. You get the faculty member who never says anything wrong, because if they said it wrong, it just got edited out. There's all kinds of stuff. It's, you know, Newton's been doing this for a while. It's basic machine learning technology, but you can basically look at all this data, clickstream, how much video you watch, ... and make suggestions to people when they make mistakes about what they should do next. You can, some of it could be fairly creepy, such as, I noticed that you didn't actually finish watching this video. Maybe you should go back and do that. That might not be a good idea. But they've got all that data, right? And they're going to get to be very good by simple machine learning at understanding what to suggest people do. They can also look at people's forum postings, all of their forum postings. And you can learn a lot. I mean, we all know that somebody comes into your office and they start talking to you, and you can kind of quickly say, okay, I think I see where it stopped working for you. These platforms are going to have access to all of that. From a research perspective, it's going to be really easy to do A/B experiments with different interventions, right? They're not paying. Okay, they're not paying. So as long as you're actually trying to do something which you think is good for them, it's quite easy to say, you know, we'll give these people this problem set and these people this problem set, and we'll see how the final turns out. And it won't be 20 and 20. It'll be 10,000 and 10,000, so you might actually have some data. Okay? There's a learning platform for us as researchers of education, too. What am I saying here? Oh, this has to do with channel. Because of the channel, because you don't need to build a building, because nobody needs to ever be in the same building, there's going to be entrance in a way that we don't have now. So these are two people from Vanderbilt in Maryland who happen to be pretty big in this mobile app space, who, even though they're not at the same school, now have a 2-course sequence. Okay? The fact that they're not at the same school doesn't matter anymore. They can teach a 2-course sequence together. That's people who are in universities. This is Udacity's Design of Everyday Things course. This is Don Norman, right? He's the god of product design. He never in his career thought of going to a university because that would be too much of a pain. But now him and this guy from IDEO, and she's got design experience too, are going to have this class about product design. Now I ask you, if you're a kid and you want to get a job at Apple, are you taking this design course or the one at the local school? You're taking this one, right? These people are from the right place. They're totally connected. And they would never have made a course before. But because the channel is there, they can whip a course together without having to sort of take a job at a university. I don't know what that circle is. It's covering something up, obviously, but I don't know. Oh, I got this from Will yesterday, actually. So Coursera has been adding non-educational partners. One is the World Bank. So the World Bank has a bunch of courses. They'll send them out there, too. Again, because the channel cost has gone so low, other people can start to play. How much time do I have, Will? Okay, because I want to leave time for questions. I think I'll probably be able to stop talking in about 8 minutes. Okay, so here's one of the things that people say a lot about MOOCs and universities, is they say, well, we don't have to worry about MOOCs because the students aren't MOOC ready. They can't do it. And a lot of that turns around whether the sort of average 18-year-old has enough self-discipline to make it through a MOOC. So here's my perspective on that. How many of our first-year students are university ready? Yeah, I mean, they're not, a lot of them. They have to get university ready. It happens once they get here. That first year can be pretty tough. I mean, I teach a class that has 30% first-year students and about 20% fourth-year students, and it's just a lot of difference on average. So they're not already university ready, and they're not already blended learning ready, but I think they're going to be ready pretty soon. And here's why. So this is Khan's new interface for their math learning center. My kids have both started doing this recently. You come to it the first time, you take a little math test. It asks you some questions where you're like, I have no idea. But it also asks you some questions like, what's 2 times 3? And it builds this little model of what you know. And then it takes their 500 or however many units, and it colors some of them blue, meaning you don't need to take them. And then you as a student sort of start, you click on one of these boxes, and you just start marching through the units. And if you try to get too far ahead, it'll sort of say, you know, you didn't do too well in this unit. Maybe you should back up to this unit. And my daughter doesn't like math, but, you know, the goal of turning every single one of those boxes blue is working. And the videos are good, and the questions are good, and it has exactly this property I just talked about, this adaptive learning property. When she makes a mistake, it knows exactly what to ask her to watch. Go watch this video. She's 11. This past summer, she decided she wanted to learn how to do cartwheels. Do you know how you learn how to do cartwheels now? You Google video how to do cartwheels. And you get a bunch of people, some of them are like 12-year-old girls, and some of them are gymnasts, how to do cartwheels. Well, 3 weeks later, she had watched a bunch of videos, and she knew how to do cartwheels. Okay? By the time she gets to university, she's going to be MOOC ready. There's just no doubt about that. How many people have seen Vi Hart before? Just Will? Okay. How many people are older and used to know who Martin Gardner was? Okay. I'm going to show you about 2.5 minutes of Vi Hart. What I want to tell you about this video when you're watching it is that she has 5.4 million views for this video. Okay. If I was a math teacher, I wouldn't like Vi Hart, or I would love her, one or the other, but it wouldn't be in the middle.
From England to the U.S., and you've got your old school supplies from England and your new school supplies from the U.S., and it's your first day of school, and you get to class and find that your new American paper doesn't fit in your old English binder. The paper is too wide and hangs out. So you cut off the extra and end up with all these strips of paper. And to keep yourself amused during your math class, you start playing with them. And by you, I mean Arthur H. Stone in 1939. Anyway, there's lots of cool things you can do with a strip of paper. You can fold it into shapes, and more shapes. Maybe spiral it around snugly like this. Maybe make it into a square. Maybe wrap it into a hexagon with a nice symmetric sort of cycle to the flappy parts. In fact, there's enough space here to keep wrapping the strip, and then your hexagon is pretty stable. And you're like, I don't know, hexagons aren't too exciting, but I guess it has symmetry or something. Maybe you could kind of fold it so the flappy parts are down and the unflappy parts are up. That's symmetric, and it collapses down into these 3 triangles, which collapse down into 1 triangle. And collapsible hexagons are, you suppose, cool enough to at least amuse you a little bit during your class. And then, since hexagons have 6-way symmetry, you decide to try this 3-way fold the other way, with flappy parts up, and are collapsing it down when suddenly the inside of your hexagon decides to open right up. What? You close it back up and undo it. Everything seems the same as before. The center is not open-upable. But when you fold it that way again, it like flips inside out. Weird. This time, instead of going backwards, you try doing it again, and again, and again, and you want to make one that's a little less messy, so you try again with another strip and tape it nicely into a twisty-foldy loop. You decide it would be cool to color the sides, so you get out a highlighter and make one yellow. Now you can flip from yellow side to white side. Yellow side, white side, yellow side, white side. White side? What? Where did the yellow side go? So you go back, and this time you color a white side green, and find that your piece of paper has 3 sides, yellow, white, and green. Now this thing is definitely cool, therefore you need to name it. And since it's shaped like a hexagon and you flex it and flex rhymes with hexaflexagon, it is. That night you can't sleep because you keep thinking about hexaflexagons. And the next day, as soon as you get to your math class, you pull out your paper strips. You'd made this sort of...
Okay, she's cherry picking. I mean, hexaflexagons, what could be more cool than that? She has another one where she does it with burritos. And you basically, you make the thing, and then you put some guacamole on, and then you fold it up so the guacamole disappears, and then you put some bean on, and you fold it up so the bean disappears, and then you put some cheese on, and you eat the whole thing. What's my real point here? Notice two things. Students are going to show up having seen the most exciting possible content presenters in the world. Right? You're not going to be able to do anything boring anymore with these kids because they're going to have seen stuff like this. They're going to know how good content presentation can be. That's one thing I will say. These are the numbers. The numbers are astounding. I mean, some of these talks are harder than this. Hexaflexagons is the funnest one. And she's also got this funny little gimmick. It always starts out, let's say you're me and you're in math class. And of course, math class is terrible because the instructors are awful and the curriculum's terrible and it's boring. But you start doodling and this incredible thing happens. It's always about this is what you should do instead of school. I just think it's quite interesting that, it used to be, Alice Cooper used to tell you what you should do instead of school. Actually, not Alice Cooper, that's too long ago. But, the new bands, whatever they are. Now you've got this person talking to the top 5% of the class and trying to peel the top 5% of the class off of school by saying, you're bored, aren't you? It's really just terrible. Look at this, it's much more cool. So our students are going to have seen a lot of great stuff by the time they get here. My point is just that they'll be MOOC ready. Oh, just a couple more things. MOOCs are going to be more than just one or two courses. We already saw one example of that, but here Wharton's putting the core of their MBA out there. Here MIT is putting 6 courses in the core of computer science out there. So this is a whole mini degree. This is a whole mini degree. It isn't just one course. Udacity is offering a premium TA service. Of course, since Udacity is doing it, Coursera is going to match. So this is interesting, right? Because this could compete with us not in the classroom, but in the TA office hours. What if you had a website where there's TAs all over the world, except it doesn't really matter where they are. They can still help you. And there's history about the exam scores of every other TA, of every other student they ever helped. So that now TAs are sort of ranked by their excellence. I don't know. Of course, there's Minerva, right? Minerva is basically the super elite mode of this new kind of education. You don't do any lectures. You learn all the content on MOOCs ahead of time before you go. But the class size is 20. 19, the class size is 19 because you don't want to make it be 20. And it's all over the world in great, fantastic places. So this is the sort of super elite mode of this new post-MOOC education. We'll have to see if the money works out. So here's what I want to kind of get to the end part. So what are MOOCs going to be? They're going to be diverse. They're going to be more than videos. They're going to be richly linked, adaptive knowledge network things. They're going to be super high quality. The winners are going to have a lot of resources to invest. Clearly, Robert Geist's calculus thing cost a lot of money to make. If he attracts more and more eyeballs, there's more and more money. Okay? There won't be money for, in North America pays for 5,000 calculus courses to be developed each year, right? There won't be 5,000 of those. There'll be 10 or 20 of those. They're going to be good. The students are going to be ready. And the scale effects matter. We may go into a funny period of time where small courses are great and huge courses are great and 400-person courses are lousy. Because when they get to have 10,000 people, the scale effects are going to start to play. Right? The big map of environmental data. All of that kind of stuff starts to happen at 10,000. It doesn't happen at 400. 400 is just hard to find a seat. So MOOC things, basically what I want to say, the whole part of the talk up to now has just been MOOCs are going to do some things much better than we can. They're going to do content presentation for some kinds of content better than we will have a prayer of doing. And so for everything MOOCs can do, the bar will go up. You won't be able to give a bad intro lecture anymore, because the students will just tweet out to the other students in class, go watch this MOOC instead. I have TAs who tell me they do that in other people's classes. They don't do the tweeting part. So what do we need to do? Well, it seems to me that if MIT and Wharton and all these places are putting all these courses online, they're kind of saying that they think they can add value in the classroom. Right? They somehow basically believe we're still going to get $60,000 a year because it's still worth coming here. Question is, what is that value? Now, it could just be selection and cohort effect, in which case that would be bad for us. But I think it's more than selection and cohort effect. There is actually something happening in the classroom, and we have to figure out what it is. So what do we need to do? Well, one thing we have to do is engage. We can't run away and hide. This thing is going to happen. And so I think we need to do, I think UBC is doing a good job of developing some of our own MOOCs. We've got flexible learning. We are trying to engage this thing. And that's good. That's what we have to do. We need to be scholars of these things. We can't just make them. We've got to consume them. And we've got to think about all sorts of different kinds of consumption models. Do I use one MOOC in this class? Do I use 6? Do I use a bunch of TED Talks? What do I do? We've got to do more than that. We have to understand, what is it in a world of super high quality content? What does that do to our whole model? We all know what's wrong with having calculus as a prereq for a course in the 3rd year. What's wrong with having calculus as a prereq for a course in the 3rd year is that by the time they get to the 3rd year, they've forgotten the calculus. Right? In a world where you've got just-in-time learning enabled by MOOCs, the prereq can just be, in the 2 weeks before the course starts, go do this. I'm not saying we have to do that. Math would have less bums in seats if we did that. That would be a problem. But that kind of thing is going to be enabled. We need to think about that. Certainly I'll say this in a minute about our labs this term. The fundamental question I think you have to ask is it going to be our business to help people learn online content? Is it going to be our business to do more than online content? Are we going to do it deeper? Are we going to do it better? Are we going to do it in a more integrated way? What are we going to do that's more better than watching the best online content? And remember, watching isn't watching. Watching is engaging. So, it's the flip plus thing we got to figure out. So here's an experiment that we're doing. We took our MOOC and our on-campus course, and we're running them in parallel this term. All of our on-campus students are in the MOOC, but they have, of course, on-campus lectures, on-campus labs, on-campus assignments. What have we learned? I know some things. I know that rather than having 2 80-minute lectures a week, I'd rather have 1 3-hour lecture a week. Because if they're getting the content from the video, I'd like to do big problems. And even 80 minutes isn't enough time to do a big problem. So I would like to change the way classroom services work in order to consume a MOOC. That's a pretty big change, actually. The students seem to love having the videos. They seem to attend fewer office hours. Our Sunday TA hours have gone to 0. Because, I'm in Surrey. I'm a little bit confused about this video. 2 choices. Watch the video, get on the bus to go back to UBC. I mean, that's just not a choice, right? So we're seeing a lot fewer students come in for kinds of help than we used to, I think because of the videos. Our UBC students are much less disciplined in their use of the forums. We offered them the choice of participating in the Coursera forums, and none of them did. They all stayed with our private UBC forum. I don't know if it's who they are or the fact that Coursera's got a better forum tool than Piazza, but the 2 forums, the discourse on them is completely different. We've also, the MOOC students tend to be more mature, but they tend to be more mature. Their average age is 35. They're post-BS. They just are. But that shows up in the courses. On the other hand, we kind of know where the UBC students are at more because we walk around during lecture while they're doing a problem, and you can kind of look around and see what's going on, and you can't do that so much with the MOOC. So the one group doesn't need as much following, but that's good because it can't get as much following. And part of what we got to figure out is how are we going to run this experiment in the next term, and the answer is we haven't figured it out. Michelle's working on enabling to give us as many choices as possible, but we're not sure what choice we're going to take. So I'm going to stop there. That's just some thoughts about what we might do. I hope you've got questions.
Thanks, and I'm just going to walk the microphone around so we can speak up to that.
Come on. Sorry, I sprung the questions on you without warning.
That's all right. So I have a number of questions, but I will ask this one. What is the value of going with a third party like Coursera? What are the downsides of going with a third party like Coursera? What do they do? What do they add? Actually, I've never worked with them, so I have no idea. And I think to myself, I would be creating, well, it could depend. Maybe I would be creating videos with the help of people at UBC. I would obviously be, coming up with all the content. What is it that they're doing that's value added that they should be getting the money for it?
What are we going to do with this video once it's done?
I think it will go into.
Oh, sorry, I didn't think about.
No, I'll give you a straight answer. Look, it depends on the day. Yesterday, was not a very happy day in Coursera land. But here's what I think they're doing. They're doing a couple things they're doing at least two things that we could not possibly do. They have, by acting as an intermediary, our course has already started. I'll put it this way. Kevin Leighton Brown's course ended. 1,000 people join a week after the course ended. Because Coursera has this brand of go there to look for courses. And so you're getting eyeballs. At the bare minimum, what they're doing is they're giving you eyeballs, and a lot of them. When your course is about to start, they tweet. They do a little media campaign for you. So you could put it on a platform here. I guarantee you're not going to get. I'm up to 30,000 in the second offering. It just wouldn't happen. Now, once you get to be Paul Krugman, then you can go be your own little platform. But the first time out, Coursera, edX, whoever, Udacity, they're all giving you a thing you couldn't get. What else are they giving you? They're giving you this platform that kind of does some stuff moderately well when it works. Look, they're having a success disaster. No, they are. They hired a number of people. They got an amount of money. They plan to have sort of 200 courses. They got 500 courses. So they're a bit overwhelmed. Better to be in that scenario than in the other scenario. So there's some technical problems, but they provide a lot of that. They host the video on AWS. There's just a lot of infrastructure stuff. You don't want to be at that level of the stack, right? That's a commodity, and they're providing a commodity service, and we don't want to be in the commodity service business. In terms of the video production, they do nothing. So Udacity, edX, Coursera, in order, do right. Udacity does everything. You fly there. Okay. edX kind of does a lot. Coursera does nothing. Okay. Here, there was a talk. We're going to put it online. But yesterday we had a panel. Monday we had a panel with the 4 UBC courses so far. And the interesting thing is that they're really spread out on a spectrum of how much was done by in-house professionals in terms of production, and how much was done by me sitting in front of a video editing tool. You can see mine was at the mostly me end of the spectrum. And the answer to that question is it depends really on what you want to do. You retain more control. So like if you're a Virgo, probably, like that, like I am, it's good to maintain control and you do all the editing yourself. If you're sort of more easygoing, it's great to have other people do your video editing because it's a ton of work. That's kind of the answer to the production question. Sorry, that was too long an answer, but nobody else had questions.
No, it's fine.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. First of all, I was wondering, can you foresee a financial model for MOOCs? So the more universities get encouraged to participate, and also not to feel they're threatened, but actually they have a complementary tool for learning for their student. And also another thing regarding adding accreditation, giving credit for the courses, then that people actually able to pass, and then they can later use it on their resume or other educational pursuits. Thank you.
So let me deal with the second question first. I mean, all the platforms are doing are looking hard at the accreditation and assessment problem, so using testing centers and things like that. Let me just point out, at least in some fields, a very simple solution to the assessment problem. Because the thing people worry about in assessment is, did people cheat? Okay. So let me just point out a very simple solution to the assessment problem. Gee, you took the MIT 6X curriculum in computer science and you got a 98, and we're going to hire you here at Google on probation. For 3 months, you're on probation. It won't take 3 months. By the end of 2 weeks, it's going to be quite clear whether that person got a 98 in those courses or was faking it. I guess what I'm saying is I think one way of dealing with this whole credit model is to go to more of a kind of internship-based hiring model. And that's consistent with the way this whole thing works. This whole thing is going to be, because it's more just in time, it isn't going to be what somebody tells me you know. It's going to be what you show me you can do. Right? I think the hiring is going to go that way anyways. I do think that the accreditation and other things that they're doing are important, but I'm just pointing out that if the world shifts a lot, they might become less important. Now, your other question was about financial model. In terms of not being threatened, look, I'm not saying we should be threatened. I'm the parent of 2 young kids. I think it's fantastic. Post-secondary education is going to be better than it's ever been before. Right? When I speak at high schools now, I say you have an opportunity to show up at university already having sampled a dozen university courses and knowing what you want to do. Education is going to be fantastic. But whenever there's change, it's hard for institutions to cope with that change, be it good change or bad change. So, I don't think we need to be mortally threatened. But I do think there's going to be a challenge to us to rethink what we do in order to deliver a much better education than we've ever delivered before. And that challenge will be exciting. But it will have the problem of, I can't just go in there and do what I've done the last 5 years. So I don't feel particularly threatened. I just feel like our game's got to go up. Oh, the financial model. But you want a financial model for universities? Or do you want a financial model for the platform providers?
I think both, because I've seen many around table that the first issue that come up regarding the MOOCs is how can you maintain it?
Right.
And for how long? And there are, other foundation or so on. Like
Yeah.
there have foundations that actually do quite a bit of money for it.
Ton of money.
Not all universities have the same resources for now in this market.
So, these things always go the same way. First, there's a lot of entrants. There's a ton of money. Everything's free. And then there's a shakeout. Exactly when the shakeout starts, I don't know. But John Dura put his chief of staff as president of Coursera this summer, which I think is a fairly clear statement that we actually want to start hearing some stories about revenue. But let me ask you a question. In the MOOC world, how many really great intro calculus MOOCs do there need to be? Everybody who thinks it's big more than 20, raise their hand. So my point is just, there doesn't have to be enough money on the table for everybody to play. There only has to be enough money on the table for some people to play. And as I said to you before, I think one of the things that people like MIT are doing with 6X, I think that's a ploy to get rid of the AP exam. The elite universities hate the AP exams, at least in my field, they're terrible. If I put out the premier first-year intro curriculum on a MOOC, and everybody in the world thinks that's the one, our kids should do that, and I can get some other schools to start using it, I've displaced the AP exam. That's, A, it's revenue, and more importantly, B, it's a thorn out of my side. So I guess I want to say that the elite schools can win without winning on revenue. Now, can they continue to spend $30 million a year with no revenue? Maybe not. But if you have a lot of eyeballs, it doesn't take a lot of revenue per eyeball. So, I mean, the money will come. It certainly isn't there. And at least one, if not two, of the companies and all the other companies are going to fold. There's going to be a shakeout. There always is. There's fewer newspapers than there used to be.
Question. Where do you see the direction of the university going then? Do you think that MOOCs will render face-to-face lectures obsolete? And the second question is, do you think that students should be producing MOOCs in the future if we are the best in compiling the best videos and resources out there?
What's the second question?
Do you think that students should be producing MOOCs then? If we can compile the best videos and if we have the sort of social media skills and research skills, because we could just Google everything. So if we could compile all those information together, do you think that students should be able to produce MOOCs as well?
You know, I think it's just going to be very interesting. I think a long time ago when people first started getting excited about the World Wide Web, and one of the things people were saying was, well, you know, everybody can be a publisher. And I was working at the time with a guy named Jeff Nunberg, who is pretty well regarded, historian of language. And he immediately said, nonsense. Nobody wants everybody to be a publisher. What people want is for there to be a small number of publishers that they can trust. The New York Times will win. Now, Nunberg was a smart guy. Maybe he was just lucky. The New York Times did win. That said, YouTube also won. So somewhere in there, there's going to be, I think there's going to be some courses, there's going to be some subject matters where, you know, they really just want an elite medical school to tell the story. And I think there's going to be some subject matters where it's going to be really great that lots of students have told the story. And there's going to be some subject matters in the middle. I don't think there's going to be a one-size-fits-all answer to your question. Okay? I do think probably, you know, really hairy surgery, I kind of really probably would rather have somebody who's been doing it for 20 years and their colleagues telling me that story. But cartwheels might, right? I mean, see what I'm saying? There's just going to be a spectrum.
And we're actually...
Sorry.
So I might wind down, but I just want to finish on a quick question of my own to tie it back to the theme of open access. One of the many criticisms that these sort of for-profit MOOCs face is that they are on the low end of open access, that they provide access to materials, but they don't really provide an ease of use for reusing those materials if I'm an instructor in a different course. And you've talked about you've had some strategies. I know UBC has been sort of very open, and you've licensed your MOOC materials under a Creative Commons license. I just wonder if you could talk to that point for.
I mean, they don't, in part because the platforms don't own the content, right? They have a license to continue to present the content. You know, that's just going to be a tough issue. These things are very expensive, and they're very expensive on an ongoing basis. There will never be a MOOC that cost $200,000 to make and was popular and didn't cost $50,000 a year ongoing. So somehow you're going to have to reconcile the fact that they're extraordinarily expensive to do with the desire to make them as widely available as possible. From the perspective of somebody who has a MOOC, I mean, there's no way I would be happy about somebody being able to launch it any time, because if you don't participate in it, if you're not there answering the forum messages, then you look bad. Because, you know, he's in the video and we post messages and he never answers. So that's another problem with these things running any time. We have taken our videos and posted them on YouTube as well, but when we post them on YouTube, there's kind of this explicit notion of, you know, that's not a course. That's some dead videos that you're free to watch. And even there, I get mail. So I just think there's going to be a tension that these are very expensive, high maintenance artifacts with the desire to make them as widely available as possible.
Great, thanks. I just want to thank Gregor again for talking today, and if we could all just join in and thank him.
Thank you.